This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com. Back from the gym, and sad day for probably all of us as Sid fans. He passed away after battle with cancer that I guess his son has talked about. It made sense because since about January 2022, I had been in contact with him on the phone. I'm not saying we called each other every week or anything, but he would call me to find out wrestling news, or I would call him to try and get a shoot interview done because he'd actually been saying for the last several years that he was going to do a shoot interview with me, but he kept putting it off. Then he was finally saying, come to Memphis and we could do one here with video equipment and stuff. But in the course of our conversations over the last few years, he had mentioned a few times that someone in his family was battling cancer. I did not think it was him. Never would have thought that it was him until today. Maybe when he was telling me about the family problems to do with cancer, it actually had to do with him, but he just didn't want to talk about it. A lot of people didn't like him because he always had good deals and were jealous of him. But he was a good guy, and for the people that hate on him for playing softball, he was just your average guy. He would rather play softball with his friends than wrestle at Madison Square Garden. He was a successful farmer. A lot of people also hate on him because he had a good wife. His wife, from what I understand, from my talks with him, took care of his money. He was well off. I think he had like a monster truck. He had a landscaping business. He was very happy in his life as a farmer. I've known him since about 2008. Pierre Carl Ouellet and him used to travel together, and PCO was a good friend of mine in those years. And PCO put me in contact with him. Actually, 2007 was the first time I used him on the very first Great North Wrestling show. He wrestled Johnny Devine. We had 4,000 fans in the Ottawa Civic Center, and the fans loved him. He was over like crazy. I just remember how down to earth he was in those days. I used him a bunch more times. I remember another time I wrestled him, and for anyone that didn't know, he stopped drinking because he told me only bad stuff happened to him when he drank. He said he would never take any uppers or alcohol. And I've never heard of him taking it since the bad incidents that he had. But he was a big pot smoker. I remember before the match where I wrestled him, which it was a dream of mine because I was a big fan of his to wrestle him, he asked if someone could pick him from the airport that had weed, and I didn't smoke it. Some guys did, and I guess they had 7 grams. And from what I understand, he had the whole 7 grams in the 2-hour trip from the airport to the town of Pembroke, Ontario. And if you watch the match with Sid, when I'm picking him up, you might think he's just really good at selling. He was exhausted from smoking that much weed. I was literally, every time I was picking him off the ground, I was picking him up because he was so high on that weed that he smoked on the way down there. And I remember there was like a little dressing room thing that happened that night that he found hilarious. He wrestled Jinder Mahal. The next night, there was another time where this company was screwing me over in Quebec. He was on the show, and I had told Sid before the match that I'm changing the finish to this match, and I'm just going to leave after. So if I don't say goodbye, that's why. And I told him the whole story, and he thought it was so funny. And the whole plan came off exactly as planned. I remember him calling after, laughing on the phone, saying, I pretended I didn't know what happened when they came like backstage, because I was in the same dressing room with Sid. Sid was like, I was looking around like, oh, he went crazy. I don't know. I don't have a clue what happened. And Sid found it so funny that he was kayfabing everybody on that, and how that plan just came across so well. Used him in Thunder Bay against Hacksaw Jim Duggan. The fans went nuts for him. We had like over 2,000 for that one. He always drew well. He always drew well. His last match ever in Canada was the Great North Wrestling 10th anniversary show, 2017. That was his official last match in Canada, and I'm honored that I got to promote his last match ever in Canada. I met him in Memphis before. I did my second shoot interview with him in Memphis. There's video of me having burgers with him at Five Guys, which, by the way, he actually bought me that lunch. Just really nice guy, not a fake guy. I remember actually when I got signed by WWE, before we found out I had hepatitis C and my contract was rescinded, he found out about it, and I was talking to him, and I remember him telling me on the phone that had that worked out, he told me that he would be my private confidant. And like, he was one of the guys that was disappointed when my contract didn't work out, because him and I were close friends. I wouldn't say close, but in the wrestling business, I would say we were friends. One of the guys that I've always stayed friends with, never had one fight with, never had any bad issues with. I'm truly sad that he's gone. Truly, truly, truly sad. And yeah, I'll go through some of your fan comments, but I just remember when he replaced Ultimate Warrior in '96 at the very first show at what's now known as Canadian Tire Center in Ottawa. I mean, I remember that match against the British Bulldog and how excited I was that he came and gave me the fist pump. I always loved seeing him. Sid Justice, he actually beat The Undertaker here in Ottawa in a body bag match back in September '91, the same taping where Ric Flair debuted. And funny enough, no one would have thought this long after Undertaker would have had the better career than Sid, because Sid was being pushed to the moon at the time. But he'd rather be a heel than a babyface, even though he was over like crazy as a babyface. So my condolences to his family. His son was on Big Brother at one point. He was really proud of his sons. Just a good family man, a good guy. I really am sad that he's gone. And like, no matter what, people can say what they want about him. He was real. He wasn't a fake guy. He was nice. He wouldn't screw you over. If you didn't like it, he would say it. The reason he wasn't in the Hall of Fame was because he was on it. He hated Johnny Ace. He always blamed Johnny Ace for telling him to go up on the top rope when that time where he broke his leg. And another quick thing about that, at one point I wanted Sid to wrestle Scott Steiner, and he said he would never wrestle Scott Steiner because it reminded him too much of that. And that was a horrifying thing to him. But he did recover from it. And if you watch like his 2007, 2008 Great North Wrestling matches, he could have still been in WWE at that time and did well. But he just didn't want to put up with the bullshit politics. I think his last WWE match was jobbing out Heath Slater in 2012. So he did make his comeback there. Another funny thing that a lot of people point out that I'll bring up about, by the way, he did not like Ted DiBiase. He did not like Ted DiBiase because he didn't feel that Ted DiBiase was a real religious person, and he was. He was actually very religious. He donated a lot of his money to church. I actually heard a story about some fans sometime. They found out where he lived, and they showed up to his house to get his autograph, and he actually invited them in. And he didn't tell them to F off or anything. They were in his house for like 20 minutes. He signed everything for them. So, I mean, that's just a great story of Sid's hospitality. But another funny story was, if you watch my second shoot interview, when I bring up Big Bully Busick, who he had some matches with in WWE, watch the one from Cornwall, Ontario, if you want to see how over Sid was. The fans go absolutely nuts from him against Busick. But I saw an interview before I did this interview with Sid where he actually went into detail on Big Bully Busick's death. Then when I did the interview with Sid, he pretended he didn't know Bully Busick was dead. So if you guys, some people thought I was cold with my answer, how I responded to that, but it was like, man, I know you knew he was dead. You're just acting like you're surprised. for some random reason. But yeah, he was a great guy. He was friends with Kerry Von Erich. Again, he wasn't, to my knowledge, he only smoked marijuana. Obviously, his body was massive at various times. And I'm not going to go into whatever supplements he took to get that big, but he was never a partier after like the whole Arn Anderson incident, which, by the way, they forgave each other for it. And honestly, he never really held that against Arn. And even in my private conversations with Sid, he still didn't like Flair, but he never actually held a grudge against Arn. So that tells you something about Sid's personality. So, Sid, I love you, man. I'm gonna miss you. I remember the last thing he said to me was call me anytime. And I wish I would have called him again, because that was about 2 months ago. He's just a great guy.